Hey, good morning, everybody. We'll be starting off here. Hello, good morning, and welcome to PsychCandy for Thursday, September 1st. First off, I want to welcome everybody that's watching out in YouTube land. Deanna, always good to see you. And yeah, so today is September 1st. I kind of had to take a little bit of a hiatus for last week, so we didn't have as many shows as I normally do. But now we're kicking back off the new month, and I will be here every day at 11:30 right here. Plus, I'm going to be having a lot of special shows coming up on through the Energy Garden on Saturdays at 2 p.m. So I encourage you, definitely don't miss those. It's going to be some good stuff. Today, I am kicking things off, talking about relationships and when we come out of relationships. Because we have to be able to form a good basis on how do we move on? How do you move past, you know? A lot of times when we come out of a bad relationship, we tend to isolate. We tend to withdraw a little bit. And we break sometimes our healthy routines for the non-healthy routines. Mark, good to see you, man. Happy Thursday. People experience a wide range of emotions when a relationship ends. And no two people are going to experience it in exactly the same way or take exactly the same length of time to get over it. However, although it may not feel like it at the time, you can move on with your life following the breakdown of a relationship. And as well as time being a great healer, there are also several other steps that we can take to kind of get ourselves back on track and start looking forward again. And it's hard. All of last year, I've shared this, but I was in a relationship, uprooted my life, moved to Indiana, not once, twice, but it was a hard relationship, and so coming out of that was very difficult to try to maintain a positive course. And it was. I had to kind of get myself retrained a little bit. I had to get myself back on track because I let myself fall into a kind of a negative scope, you know. Graciela, Elizabeth, great to see you guys come in. Welcome. I am talking to you today about the aspect and power of moving on. And how do we move on? You know, first off, you need to allow yourself that time to kind of grieve the loss of the relationship when it ends. Initially, you may choose to do this internally on your own, but some people find that they want to seek support, you know, from maybe other family members or, you know, close friends right away. And there's no harm in either approach. However, you're going to be processing thoughts and emotions internally. And those things might include things like guilt, anger, blame, jealousy, you know, even shock and denial. And then you might go down into that place of despair and depression. And then sometimes it affects our self-worth. And ultimately, however, you will at some point, you're going to want to confide in some close friends, perhaps other family members or something. You might even seek out professional help if you're finding it impossible to kind of come to terms with what just happened. We get into these relationships, and some relationships, man, a relationship is part of how we're wired. Human beings, we were not designed to just be alone. You look back at, I don't care what your spiritual belief is, or what you believe, you know, scientifically or religiously or whatever, human beings were not designed to just be a recluse, to always be by yourself. There's an aspect to a relationship. The problem is that we have changed the scope sometimes of a relationship. And most people today look back on one or two maybe failed relationships, one or two things that just didn't happen. And these relationships are not just romantic relationships, it involves your friendships too. Sometimes it's the relationship that you got with family or something like that. And the thing is a relationship embeds itself, you know? It takes root. When you look at romantic relationships, for example, and you don't have to be married for this to be the case, but sometimes if you share property or even have children together, well, you're going to need to spend some time sorting out those practicalities of things. You know, if you had joint finances or what your living arrangements were, access to the children, etc. And the sooner that you sort out those mutually agreed arrangements and establish some kind of new routine, well, the better it's going to be for everybody involved. And you'll both need to agree to discuss these issues openly and honestly with one another, and then you both might end up to be, you know, prepared to make some compromises too in that. But you have to remember that to move on means that sometimes you are going to have to compromise, and that compromise is okay. Even if you're still bitter that the relationship ended. Even if it was related to something that was negative and really did a number on you, you have to think, what's better for me right now? Is it better for me to make this one compromise and park all the rest for a minute so that I can move on and let this other person move on so I can better my world, better my atmosphere, and better my life? We have to realize that moving on means that you're giving yourself permission to move on. Now, I talk about that a lot, about the aspect of giving ourselves permission to do something. I'm giving myself sometimes permission to feel sad, permission to process through this anger, permission to process through a feeling or an emotion. But then we want to also give ourselves permission to let it go. It's never going to serve you any purpose to hold on to all of this. Now, this might be true for you, and it also might be true for somebody that you know. But you know the scope of, well, I've been through so many bad things. I've been through so many bad relationships. My last relationship hurt me so deeply, and now I'm tainted. I have a jaded view on relationships. Screw relationships. Just going to end up the same way again because I've already had 2 or 3 in the past. They've just been bad, so everything's just going to be bad. Well, that's because you're holding on to some stuff. It's because you haven't allowed yourself and given yourself that permission to just sit with something, feel it, and let yourself learn that new routine that you're going to need in order to maintain a healthy scope. Allison, good to see you. Deborah, good to see you. Welcome. You know, the other thing here is that, and I mentioned this, that sometimes in these relationships, whether you are married or not, when children are involved, it's hard. Now, I haven't shared the full nth degree story behind my last relationship, the one that I was in Indiana with. But let me just tell you this: she had two children. Now, I love children, and the other part was this. Sadly, she had a routine in her past, and I'm sharing this for a reason, so bear with me. But she had a pattern in her past where she dragged multiple relationships with multiple men through the lives of these children. And when I got into that relationship, I mean, it was serious. I uprooted my life and moved to Indiana. And then guess what? I got attached. I got attached to the kids. I was the one there day in, day out. I was going to the schools. I was doing the thing, right? And in that relationship, I had the children sit down and ask me multiple times, hey, can you promise that you're not going to leave? That broke my heart because that wasn't something I could promise at that moment. I could say it would never be my intention, but I had to take into account the past, her past and in general. Now, I was committed, but I couldn't make that promise. But you have to understand, in those relationships, children are probably going to feel just as hurt and vulnerable as you do. And you may not, find that they're going to need like constant reassurance that things are, going to work out just fine. But the thing is that when you've been together and children form that thing, guess what? They're starting to learn the same practices you are. Relationships suck. Nothing is set. Nothing is a committed aspect. It's a horrible position. And a lot of times in breakups and when it's at that point of moving on, you have to think also children have to learn how to move on too. And people lose sight of that sometimes when kids are involved. Be mindful. Like I said, even if you're not married, even if it's somebody else's kids, well, when you're in the picture now, well, when you break up, you're not just breaking up with your partner. You're breaking up with the children too. They're breaking up with you. It's a process. And a lot of people don't see it that way. And it can do so much damage. So moving past that, we have to keep on top of ourselves, don't we? That's where that self-love comes in. Which, by the way, tomorrow's show is the power of self-love. So don't miss that. It's kind of the recap to this one today. But the ending of a relationship is stressful. And we can often neglect like our own health. Therefore, it's important to still maintain a healthy, balanced diet, take regular exercise, And as both of these things are important alleviators of stress, it also can impact a good position on reducing those negative moods, that negative mindset, that negative flow. When we go through the breakups, and I was guilty of this, man, I let my routines get messed up. I let my routines get out of whack. And if you have kind of a well-maintained daily routine, it's very important that you stick to it. It's especially important that you maintain those meetings you need to go to. Maintain your social sporting get-togethers, with family or friends. Let me tell you something. Locking yourself away in isolation is only going to make matters far worse. I promise you that. I promise you that. I can't tell you how many patients I have, on a regular basis that they end up at a point they truly seek therapy and need therapy because they have pretty much isolated themselves mentally and emotionally. They've isolated physically. They've cut everybody off. And a lot of that sometimes comes from that point of they see that relationship that's ended. It was a failure. I failed. I'm depressed. I'm not worth it. My value has dropped. Therefore, I'm no good for anybody. It's a horrible place. Don't ever look upon the end of a relationship as a failure. Because, yeah, you can say, well, how can I not? The relationship failed. But don't fall into the trap of viewing your entire relationship in terms of it being a total failure. You got to think about it. Life's all about successes, and it's also about making mistakes. And no relationship, even the most successful ones, are ever free from mistakes. The ending of a relationship is often an important stepping stone to discovering what it is you want and don't want out of any future relationship. And it gives you the opportunity to discover more about yourself and how you might approach a relationship differently the next time around. We want to be able to view that as, I want to grow from this. See, I can openly and honest tell all of you, do I want to go back to the exact same kind of relationship that I was in when I was in my last one? No. I got hurt too. I got hurt. It was a mess. So I learned from it. I gained a new concept. I also learned a different value system for myself, for relationships, for what I seek, for what I want, and also what I'm going to put out there. And there will be a next time and another relationship to look forward to. And it's crucial that you don't simply get stuck in the past, grieving constantly over your former relationship. Once you've got the grieving process out of the way, you should start to set some fresh goals in your life. Take manageable steps towards achieving those goals. Don't cast total blame on yourself or your ex-partner. Don't end up kind of fostering that scope where total blame on yourself, or the ex, for that relationship ending. Once time's passed, you'll almost certainly find that both parties played some part in the relationship breakdown. So it's better if, from an early standpoint, you take your share of the responsibility and tell yourself that you're going to learn from those lessons and then move on. Move on. One thing that's most important here is that we look to the future. As you start moving forward, you should be looking to gain a total acceptance of who you are as a person, what lessons you have learned from that relationship, and take any positive steps in terms of setting those new goals and maybe even change your attitude and approach to relationships in general. And work through these issues gradually until that you're satisfied that you have gotten rid of any remaining emotional baggage so that you don't take that into that next relationship. Or else, guess what? You're just going to repeat the same cycle. And then that next relationship is most likely going to end in the same process. And guys, it's hard. It's hard for somebody, dude, you're done. Move on. But then there's that internal thing, right? Yeah, but you just don't understand. You weren't there, man. You didn't live it. You don't understand. It's not just that easy to move on. Well, sometimes it's not. But you know what? You have to start trying to learn to make it easier to be able to move on. For you. You're moving on for you. You got to move on for yourself. We've spoke about this so many other times, about all the things that get damaged. That self-worth, your self-love, that relationship you have with you and who you are as a person. Trust, being able to trust again. Being able to believe again. Finding your passions again. These are so important. These are some areas that we're going to talk about tomorrow in the concept of the power of self-love. Because listen, if you don't love yourself, and you're not treating yourself good, what do you think you're putting out there for the next person to use as a understanding point about who you are and what you want and where you're going as a person? That's important. We have to be able to get there. We have to be able to be in that place for ourselves. We want to move on. Moving on is healthy. Moving on is strong. It's empowering. It's liberating. It's elevating. And we want to elevate. Moving on after that relationship, no, it will never be just an easy walk in the park. But love yourself enough to give yourself permission to move on. Give yourself permission to process through. And when you process through something, you got to let it go. I'll have people come in that have relationship problems, right? and the things out of their mouth is constant. Yeah, well, that person did this, and that's, this happened, this happened. Yeah, it happened, meaning it's past. It's already done. Now we got to get over it. Sometimes people get stuck and holding on to something. Let me tell you something. You will never, ever retract it. You will never, ever erase it. You will never, ever remove it from ever happening. It happened. It happened. So now, deal with the fact that it happened. Process through it and realize it's gone. It's done. Yes, it left a residual. Fix it. Let the past be the past at last. Keep that in your brain. Let the past be the past at last. Because when you do that, that's when you can get into that scope of understanding that the approach you take in every single situation of your life determines the outcome. Always. It's true of everything. Everything. So just balance yourself. Give yourself that love. Embrace yourself. It's okay to take some time and grieve a little bit. That's okay. Lick your wounds a little bit. But then realize, hey, I'm human. Mistakes happen. Sometimes relationships don't work out. Sometimes people drift apart. Sometimes it's all these things can happen, and that's just because we're all human beings and nobody's perfect. We fail sometimes, and it's okay. We get right back up. We're going to keep what? Moving on. We're just going to keep it on. That's what's important. Guys, I want to thank you so much for being here. I hope that you were able to pull something from this today. Deanna, Allison, Deborah, Elizabeth, Graciela, Mark, everybody watching out in YouTube land, thank you so much. Listen, today is September 1st. I apologize that I was slack the last couple of weeks, but I had to kind of take a little bit of a hiatus. I've also been working on some new articles and stuff, but today is the new month, and I will be here with you guys every day at 11:30 a.m. And also, I encourage you, please look. I have some exciting shows coming up on Saturday through the Energy Garden. And on this Saturday, I have guest Alex King. She is a hypnotherapist, and we're going to be talking about the power of reprogramming your subconscious. Don't miss that show. If you don't come and hear me at all this week, come Saturday at 2 o'clock. I promise you, you're going to love it. So, guys, have a blessed and amazing rest of your Thursday. Sending all of you love and light. And remember, just keep loving yourself and keep moving on. So, till tomorrow, be happy, be healthy, and I will see you guys again soon. Cheers.
It's no secret